15 years old, that is when I experienced firsthand the crisis on the southern border. That started off my advocacy journey to battle human trafficking, especially here in South Texas. You would believe that if we lived on the border that we would focus so much more on human trafficking, but truly we do not. The Advisory Council, alongside congressmen like Mike Lawler and Kat Kammick and other fantastic individuals. And all in all, I'm a community activist here in South Texas, just upholding our natural Hispanic values along the border and our beliefs of just God, family, and country.
Welcome back to The Bridge, guys. We got an absolutely fantastic guest, Angelina Tamez. She's absolutely fantastic, knows what she's doing, very active with the GOP and the RNC. Recently, we've had a lot of turning point individuals here. Let's get into the GOP circle side of things. Angelina, I'll let you take it from there.
Well, hi, my name is Angelina Tamez, and I'm from South Texas. I'm the vice chair of the Hidalgo County GOP Committee for Public Relations. So I'm the vice chair of the PR committee. And I am the president of the only conservative group on my campus, and I'm a member of the RNC Youth Advisory Council, alongside congressmen like Mike Lawler and Kat Kammick and other fantastic individuals. And all in all, I'm a community activist here in South Texas, just upholding our natural Hispanic values along the border and our beliefs of just God, family, and country as the alongside the Republican Party here.
Okay, so you've mentioned a whole bunch of things, different roles, different goals. How old are you? Like, how long have you been in the game?
I have been in Republican politics since I was 15 years old. 15 years old, that is when I experienced firsthand the crisis on the southern border. And I've felt firsthand that my southern community wasn't as safe as I believed it was. And that started off my advocacy journey to battle human trafficking, especially here in South Texas. You would believe that if we live on the border that we would focus so much more on human trafficking, but truly we do not. We overlook it immensely. And I began speaking with congressmen, with representatives here at the local level, and everyone basically dismissed me, which led me to the GOP here, and they let me in with open arms.
Yeah. Okay, so what were your connections to getting involved with the GOP? Like, what did you have to do to get involved with them?
So I am mostly involved with the Hidalgo County GOP, not the GOP itself as a whole, but with the Hidalgo County GOP. And that started with me just walking into the doors and speaking with the chairwoman, Adrian Garza, and some of the local candidates that were on the ballot. And I told them my concerns, that I felt human trafficking was very overlooked, that I had to witness firsthand that crisis with myself. And I explained to them, and I said, look, my family, they don't support you guys. I come from a very democratic family. And when I asked them, when I was 14 years old, I asked my mother, and I remember this, I told her, I said, Mom, what are Republicans like? Because here in Hidalgo County in South Texas, it was that you were shunned if you were a Republican. I had never met one because they were so, well, there wasn't many of them, but the ones that they were, they left it to themselves because it's a majority Democratic district. And I asked my mother, what are Republicans like? And she said, they are evil, selfish people. Wow. And so I told them, I said, look, my family doesn't agree with you all. They will never vote for you all. But I want to get involved with this, and I'm giving you the opportunity to explain to me why you all are on the battlefield against human trafficking. And they explained to me that as Hispanic Republicans, they are for border security, not because they are against our people, but because an open border funds the cartels and the human traffickers that try to take children. in our community.
So, what have you seen any movement inside your family to maybe change opinions, or are you kind of the lone wolf?
No, actually. So it was a domino effect, I like to call it. It started off with myself, and getting right after I visited the GOP, I spoke to them and I said, okay, who's on the ballot for Congress? And at the time it was Monica de la Cruz, who is now the congresswoman for our district. And I said, okay, how can I get this woman elected? And we started block walking then and there. And I went to my parents, and my father's an independent. He's a business owner, so he's a bread and butter type of voter. He's typically that's how Hispanics are. They just like what's best for the economy, what's best for their business, what's going to help them bring prosperity and keep their children safe. So my father wasn't necessarily a Democrat. My mother was a ginormous liberal, though. She wasn't a Hillary Clinton supporter. She was a Bernie Sanders supporter.
Oh, wow.
And I guess. And so my mother, she told me, look, I love you, Angelina, and I think it's amazing that you're getting involved with local politics, especially at your age. But just know, just because you support them doesn't mean I'm going to. Yeah. So it began as that until COVID-19 hit. And this was when I was in high school. And my mother's a travel nurse. So she moved to Austin. And it was COVID central over there. She was needed. And what happened was my mom, she can't get vaccinated because she has this underlying illness where she's gotten maybe 2 vaccines before for other diseases. And she's ended up in the hospital both times because she has this reaction to vaccines. So when a virus comes, she just kind of takes care of her immune system. She says, I don't need a vaccine. Yeah. And so as a nurse, her boss has told her, look, this is the law now that you all need to get vaccinated and it's mandatory. And she assumed that she could simply talk her way out of it and tell them, look, I cannot get vaccinated. I'm healthy though, so I will be okay. But just this could hurt me and I could be on a ventilator at the hospital if I get vaccinated from an adverse reaction. And they told her, no, you have to get vaccinated or you lose your job. In the middle of a pandemic where she was taking care of 2 grandchildren, 2 toddlers. They told her, you are out of a job if you do not get vaccinated. And I get a call from my mother that same day. And she tells me, hey, Angelina, I just want to talk about politics with you. And I tell her, no, I'm not in the mood. Because it's always, she will argue, right? And so I said, no, we're not doing that right now. I'm busy. And she goes, no. I don't want to have a debate with you. I just want to tell you that you were right. And
okay,
when I tell people that story, they think that I got so happy. It's like, I knew it. And I started celebrating. And no, because I went through the most traumatic thing anyone could have gone through for me to wake up and become a Republican, to walk away from the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And so when she told me you were right, the first thing that went to my mind was, what did these people do to my mother?
Oh, wow.
And she explained to me what happened. And after that, she's been voting. The first time she voted Republican was for Monica de la Cruz. She drove down here on election day and she voted Republican from bottom to top of the ballot.
That's one heck of a transformation. Holy mackerel. So, okay, you have a really interesting story. Now, I don't know all the details, but that right there is something that the Republican Party struggles with. We're really good at owning the libs with facts and logic in the Ben Shapiro type mentality, but we are terrible at spreading our message with something that relates with the emotional side. The left does a fantastic job. They don't care if their message is true or not. If it relates with the emotions, they'll say it. Right there, you have a story that's based on truth, but also relates with people. And even if they can't relate to it, they're sympathetic towards it. That's a really interesting story.
Yes, definitely.
Now, has that story been able to reach a fair amount of people? Like, have you been able to use that in the campaign world?
When we were block walking, definitely. Yep. I remember when we were block walking here in South Texas for Mayra Flores specifically, I hit so many doors of people who would tell me, "You're the first Republican who has knocked on my door to ask for my support."
Wow.
Um, and actually, several people told me that not even Democrats would knock on their doors. And so there was one specific door I knocked on of this man, and it was for the special election for Myra Flores. And I tell him, like, I introduce myself. Hi, my name is Angelina Tamez, and I'm a volunteer for the campaign for Myra Flores here and for the special election in Texas 34. And we just want to let you know that she's on the ballot. And I give him the rundown, and he says, I appreciate you coming out here, especially because in South Texas, it's always 100 degrees. And so he goes, I appreciate you being here in the equator sun, but I'm not going to vote. And I told him, I was like, all right, all right. And I said, well, I appreciate your honesty. And I said, but can I ask why? Why aren't you going to support her? And he goes, well, and he explains that his family is from Mexico, which is common. A lot of people here in South Texas are either first generation American or second generation American. And he explained that his family's from Mexico, and he just cannot agree with the Republican Party that their immigration. Apparently we don't believe in immigration, that we are not fair to Mexican descendants. And I told him, I said, you know what, I'm going to tell you this, sir, but not as someone who's on Myra's campaign team. I'm not going to tell you this as a volunteer for Myra. I'm going to tell you this as someone who, like you, as your neighbor, as someone who lives in your community, who is your friend. And I told him, I come from the same background as you. I'm the first in my family to attend college, actually. And I come from a Spanish-speaking home, an immigrant family, and everyone in my family is a Democrat. I said, except for me, because in the summer of 2020, I outran an attempted kidnapping here on the southern border. And it was after that where I went to the GOP and I met Myra Flores personally, and I spoke to her, and she told me, she said, I was born in Mexico and I support border security and funding our border patrol agents, not because I'm a hypocrite and not because I hate our people, but because an open border funds the people who tried to take you that day. And I told this man, I said, look, I'm telling you this as someone who lives in your community. But overall, the reason that no one has knocked on your door thus far, the reason no Democrat has knocked on your door this far, is because I want to be honest with you, because they believe that your vote is already in the palm of their hands.
Yeah.
And that they don't have to earn it. Because just because they have a D on their name on the ballot, you're obligated to vote for them. Myra Flores was the only one in this district who supported me when I needed it the most. And that's why I support her. Yeah. And why you should too. And he ended up saying, you know what? I'll vote for her, but I'm not voting for any other Republican. And so I said, you know what? I'll take it. This is a step.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a step forward.
You know, I find that interesting. I want to know if you guys see that, especially down in Texas too. It seems, forget that I'm a Republican, it seems the Democrat Party has no respect for the constituents. Jared Golden, he is our representative here in CD2 in Maine. Bruce Poliquin and the rest of our field team and everybody knocked thousands and thousands of doors last election cycle. And Jared Golden did little to nothing to campaign here. And just by assumption of getting votes, he won. In Piscataquis County here, he might have came maybe once. I don't think he had anything planned here. Didn't come at all. Just assumed that, whatever. But he didn't really care. And doesn't do anything in the press. Doesn't reveal much of anything about his voting records. You have to dig to really do the research. I think it was 93% of the time voted with Nancy Pelosi. And now you bring the race component into it. It's interesting down there. They just assume since you're Hispanic, you're going to vote for them.
Right. They
have no respect for their constituents. That part of me, it's surprising, and then the other part, it's not. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the backstory, a lot of how you got started. Where do you want to go next? What's your goal? We've got a huge election cycle coming up. What's your goals?
a lot of people ask me that if I'm going to continue my work in politics, and I want to do as much as I possibly can. I am an advocate for children. It is the reason that they're the reason I've stayed in this for thus long,
Yeah.
uh, because of human trafficking, abuse, scholarships being taken away right now in Nevada for students who are now having to go to classrooms where they're just overfilled. They're pushing an agenda that the parents don't even agree with. Now these students are being heartbroken because they have to go to these public schools when they were promised a private great education. Now
Yeah.
these scholarships are being stripped away in Nevada from them. And I applaud Governor Lombardo for at least standing up, and trying to defend this. But it's very heartbreaking. And so that's where I want to go in my life. I want to become an attorney, and I
Okay.
want to fight on the legal side for humanitarian situations, especially those that involve children. I know so many people tell me, if you're going to become an attorney, do not get involved with family law, anything that involves children or immigration, because it is so just overwhelming, exhausting, and heartbreaking. That's what I've heard from so many people.
Yeah.
Being involved with children is so heartbreaking and exhausting. And there are so many situations where there's not a great option for them. You have to choose between the lesser of good evils. And you know what? That's where I feel that I'm called to the most.
Yeah.
And while many people don't want to step up to that, I feel that that is my calling. And when God tells you to do something, you don't hesitate to do it.
Amen to that. No, 100%. So you want to be an attorney. You're going into the deep end, really. How do you think your experience with GOP politics is going to benefit you with that side of things?
So, because I have been an avid campaigner, and because I've listened to countless stories from my community, and I've blocked so many doors, a lot of people, they kind of make fun of me for that because I did block walk a lot, and they come after me for it. And I said, no, I genuinely enjoyed it because I listened every door knock. I heard a different perspective and a different story that Washington ignored. And just that really made my year. And a lot of people won't understand where I'm coming from, but truly, I believe that campaigning has helped unlock so many different perspectives. And because I wholeheartedly believe that just because I'm a Republican, I still need to listen to the other side, because two perspectives are equally important to each other. Not one perspective should be overlooked. And so I believe that listening to these stories of parents who are struggling to put food on the table, like a mother I spoke to who lives on the corner of Cedar Avenue in McAllen, who's a single mother, and she's struggling to choose between putting food on the table or putting gasoline in her car to take her children to school. Or the father of the door I knocked on in the 7th Precinct District of Brownsville, who's mourning the loss of his son to a fentanyl overdose. It's because of these perspectives and this campaigning that I've done previously that I know I can make a fantastic attorney. And I say that in the least cocky way possible. But yes.
No, but those experiences, even if they don't necessarily impact your future a ton, they really help you grow as a person. If there's anyone who gets it, I mean, I get it. I'm the one knocking thousands of doors here in the state of Maine, and you're doing the same thing down in Texas. The amount of people that you get to talk to hear their perspective, it's also interesting. I'm about as hardcore conservative gets. I can talk with someone who would be best friends with Bernie Sanders and be their best friends 2 seconds later. It is so interesting how we are so far divided in this nation. But if you know how to talk, you can be really close to these people that'll never agree with you. So that's very interesting.
And hey, there have been certain people who I've spoken to at events, or that there were multiple times when I was at LARC, which LARC is the bigger voting place here in McAllen, and there were times where I was just holding up a sign like, yes, go vote for Monica, go vote for Myra, and there would be people who would be driving by in their car, and they would point at me and they would say, you knocked on my door, and I'd be like, yes, I did, I'm so happy you're here, so definitely you get closer to your community, and they have really just made my heart complete.
No, 100%. Well, the testimonials of people that you get to hear too. Now those are honestly some more of the interesting ones. You mentioned the holding the signs and people talking to you. I'll remember we were campaigning for Governor LePage outside of a gas station called Dysart's in Bangor. The lady drives by and hollers out, "Do you have any policies for recovering drug addicts?" Sadly, she
Wow.
didn't go into the gas station, but we're like, "Yes, come here, come here." But she had the guts to ask, and you could see there was almost a glimmer of hope, like, oh, somebody might care. Honestly, it made me think of the guy you were talking about a second ago. Of, oh, maybe I was wrong.
No, yes, you are. And that is another issue that is immensely overlooked by, I feel, both sides of the aisle, the opioid crisis that has hit our nation. And that is another issue of why I got involved in politics in the first place. I come from a family that has struggled with drug abuse,
Yep.
just as so many Americans have. And they are still great people. My
Yep.
family that has struggled with opioid abuse, they are still great people, just as every American. And like I said, I did knock on a door once in the 7th Precinct District of Brownsville of a father who was mourning the loss of his son to a fentanyl overdose. And I that is an issue that I have immensely advocated for. I believe that there's two factors to it: government government responsibility and pharmaceutical accountability. Because in the 80s and the 90s, especially with OxyContin, what these pharmaceuticals they would do, they would, like big Purdue Pharma, they would forget to tell these patients that OxyContin and these other opioids had such a high addiction rate. And so what would happen is these consumers, they would take OxyContin and they would get addicted to it. Then their prescriptions would end, and then that puts the cartels in power. Now they have to fill that void. So where do they go? They go to heroin. They go to cocaine because of opioid abuse. I forgot exactly what statistic it was, but more than 60% of heroin addicts in around the 80s and 90s there was a poll, and they said that the first drug that they abused was prescribed.
Wow.
Yes.
Holy mackerel. I find it interesting. You and I both being in the political world, it's easy to say, okay, the government needs to be the ones offering the solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the church has a responsibility most of all there.
Yes.
I wouldn't have had that perspective as strongly if I hadn't been blessed to be raised in the area near Calvary Chapel, Orrington here in Maine. They have a program called CRD, and most drug rehabilitation programs fail, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Their success rates are pitiful. CRD, their success rate is above 70%, close to 80%. That is not to promote CRD. That's to promote the message that they are spreading. It is absolutely amazing to watch the people that come out of that program. Is everyone perfect? No. We're all human. We're all fallen. But the stories and testimonies that these people have, when you got a man who's been addicted to just about every drug there, and then a few years later is a pastor in Portland, Maine, that doesn't happen most all with any drug rehabilitation programs. But with the power of Jesus Christ, true rehabilitation can come. True liberation can come. There's a reason that I got a Bible right behind me. I got a bunch of political signs, but this is at the core. And those of us who are conservative and Christian in politics need to make sure that our faith, specifically Jesus Christ, is at the core of it.
Absolutely.
We've got a lot of politicians on our side of the aisle that use the name God, but that's nowhere near as selective. I mean, the LGBTQ community, their God is their gender. They got a God. Yeah, so do we, but we got the all-powerful God on our side, and people need to be set free, and only true liberation comes through him. So,
amen. Amen.
Oh, pastor right there, I tell you what.
You should, why are you in politics? You should be a preacher, man.
I
What?
strongly,
This isn't your calling. This isn't your calling. We just saw what your calling really is.
I'd strongly consider it, but God's lining things up in the political world. Especially in Maine, we've had a lot of good Republican leaders in terms of getting good legislation passed,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the economy. But anything else? Not really. It's been a lot of rhino leadership. Social issues, the Republicans are weak. We have had 3 consecutive election cycles of relative okay wins, but nothing that great. Last election cycle, we should have had a massive red wave, and we got absolutely shellacked. What does that come down to? Only campaigning on the economy and avoiding anything regarding social issues and having little to no Christian leadership or even any sort of faith in there at all. Um, the church is dead silent. The church is petrified to cover any political issue. You don't need to make your church service a mega rally, but educating your flock on these issues. So many churches in this area are so petrified to do it. I can't ignore that. So whether I'm at the pulpit years from now or I'm sitting on Pennsylvania Avenue in 2040, I don't know. I'm going where God calls me, but the church is silent. The church is petrified to do what it needs to do, and we need to step up. And it takes people like you and I being vocal to bring that change here in the church, because the old school style isn't working.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. There needs to be a balance of campaigns that discuss social issues such as, yes, faith, God, family, hard work. And then there has to be a balance of also discussing economical issues.
Yep.
There has to be that fair balance. I've always, especially in our Hispanic community, people will ask me, well, what really made the shift of Hispanic voters going from Democrat to Republican in our districts so quickly? And I tell them, it wasn't that they made the shift. They just realized that they were never truly Democrat.
Yep.
By outreaching and letting them know that there were many people I spoke to who I would open up to them, and I would tell them, look, our candidates and our party, our platform, we put God first and our families, and we want them to grow up in a community that's safe. And whenever I would bring up God, they would say, you're one of the only people involved in politics who have discussed your faith, because that is the backbone of us and our Hispanic community and what we believe for. And then on the contrary, I like to tell people about my family story of achieving the American dream. My family, they immigrated from Mexico. So from Mexico, they left to Chicago. And that's where they went initially, to Chicago. Why did they go to Chicago? Why did my abuelos go to Chicago? Because there were factories. There were many jobs in construction and factories and manufacturing. And yes, while the conditions could have been brutal, and while my abuela's hands were hurt and they were bruised, and so were my abuelos, they saw that as making the means of their labor through harsh labor to care for their family. They didn't have that in Mexico. And because they went to Chicago to work in factories, they were able to work up, save money, and now they're retired and very well.
Yeah.
And only that, they achieved their American dream, and only that can be achieved here in the United States, not in Latin America and the countries that we fled from. Yes, there were hardships and numerous just conditions that they had to work through, hard conditions. However, they sacrificed a lot because they own the means of their labor here, only here in Chicago.
Yeah. Now, what brought your family to Texas?
Brought my family here to Texas, I believe I believe it was something along the lines of, well, my tias and my tios, they from Matamoros, Tamaulipas. If you don't know where that is, it is maybe an hour away from where I currently am. And they came from Matamoros to the States and they just resided on the border.
Sure.
And so my grandmother eventually they moved down from Chicago back home to the border where I am now to just reunite with family.
No, that's wicked cool. So we've covered a ton. We've probably only scratched the surface for what we could discuss, but I think this is absolutely fantastic. I'd love to have you on for another episode. That would be absolutely fantastic. I think we could really tap into what the RNC is going to do to reach younger people for this upcoming cycle in the future. In Maine, it used to be more of a conservative state. Republicans got squishy, and it's become more of a left-wing stronghold. We're working to change that. I'm nervous Texas is heading that way. I'd love to hear your stance and a whole bunch of other things. So I'd love to have you back on, and thank you for joining us.
Of course.
You got it. God bless.
Okay.